Good. Can you please remind me today's token so I can write it here for those? 01. Okay, for those who arrived late. This is ours. Okay, so great. Sharing the screen. We're back here. Okay, and we have to discuss the, we go on with the institutions. Where is the, okay. And there was a way to have the presentation. What was it? Okay, no. Oh my God, why am I back here? Okay, there we started with the parliament. Then we discussed the summit, the European Council with its role and also the criticism that we can address to the new, or better, not a criticism if you want, but the choices, no? To somehow change the institutional balance in favor of this body that has indeed the power to find, solutions.
I think you have the microphone turned off. Somebody in the group chat.
No. Audio is on. Video is on. This one
yes,
is
Professor,
on.
everything is okay.
What? So can you hear me? Say something.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So what I was saying yesterday is that the Lisbon Treaty has given a visibility to the European Council and a greater visibility than it had before, placing it among the institutions, and also somehow increased its power, which was also increased by circumstances. The fact that there have been crises, the financial crisis and international crisis, and then the pandemic crisis, that made it necessary for the member states to get together frequently in the framework of the European Council to find, solutions, possible approaches to the crisis. And of course, this is a positive thing insofar as the member states get together to find, some creative solutions in the meaning of, the Schuman Declaration. This has not always been the case, though, because many times the solutions that were found have been compromises, just necessary, but not satisfying for who wants the integration to improve, to increase. For example, I was reading this morning for another issue, the conclusions of the European Council from December last year, 2020. about conditionality in the protection of the EU financial interests of the budget. It is a regulation that has been approved, so it is in force, regularly enforced as a regulation, has been approved by the Parliament, the Council. It has been published. You find it on the official journal of the Union, and it is a very important regulation because it allows the institutions, so the Commission and the Council, to take measures against states that that do not comply with the requirements of rule of law in their own legal systems. And in all cases where this non-compliance with the rule of law requirements is has repercussions, has consequences on the effectiveness and transparency of the use of financial resources that come from the EU. Classical example here that is made also by the regulation is the case where the state does not effectively prosecute cases of fraud or corruption inside the system, and that this fraud or corruption has an impact on the rational and transparent and effective use of EU financial resources, like the ones, especially the ones that are placed at the disposal of the states with the Next Generation EU and the Recovery Fund. So it is a quite important regulation. It's a quite important regulation that, of course, involves monitoring by the Commission of the legal systems of the member states. So whether the rule of law is implemented in the member states, whether they have an effective and efficient judicial system, laws, fighting against corruption, and an effective system of monitoring how the funds are used, and so on. So it gives monitoring power to the Commission, then the decisional power is with the Council, and this was a compromise in the drafting of the regulation because it was the Commission that was supposed to decide. Now you understand, we still haven't studied the role of the Commission with respect to that of the Council, but the Commission is the independent body. And the Commission is the one, for example, that decides for the violations of democracy, rule of law, fundamental rights in the conditionality system towards third countries, suspending benefits, deriving from trade agreements or trade regulations towards third. It is the Commission, because it is the independent body, the one that monitors the activity and the life of trade relations, and has this implementing power. In this case, this power has been given to the Council, and the Council, as we will see, works according to different dynamics, to different considerations, because there are the governments in the Council. So it is true that in the cases that are envisaged by the regulation, the interested state will not vote. No, you cannot ask a state to vote against itself. No, obvious. So that state will be excluded from the vote. But it can always find allied. Sorry, what's going on? Are you speaking with me? Otherwise, please mute your mic. So it is normal that government will find allies in the Council, among the other governments, and this is, for example, you know, as we will see when we will analyze the infringement procedure. So the case of actions brought against a member state for infringements of European Union law, we will see that that action is brought by the Commission normally. And it is possible also that another member state brings an action. But if you look at the numbers in all these years of, you know, of European Union life, you can count actions brought by other member states on the fingers of one hand, because it's, you know, they do not attack each other very easily. So the same here. This fact that the final decision has been attributed to the Council weakens the system very much. And this is for one thing. Then I was reading, as I told you, the conclusions of the European Council in December, so immediately after the adoption of this regulation, which is dates to the December last year. And the European Council asked, remember, the regulation was already in force, had been published. The European Council asked the Commission to basically wait to apply the regulation. Wait for what? First, to wait to write down a draft of criteria for the application of the regulation, which is not required by the regulation, but, you know, just to buy some time. And then to wait for the judgment by the Court of Justice that had been, because some of the states, Poland, I think, but maybe also other states, have already brought action for the annulment of this regulation. So the Council, the European Council said, okay, let's wait to know what the court says. If the court says that the regulation is okay, good. If not, it will be annulled, which is also another, another, you know, another position that is not very correct, considering the institutional balance, because it is true that the Court of Justice could annul that regulation, the case is pending. But it is also true that up to that moment of the judgment, the regulation is fully in force. So there is absolutely no reason why it should be suspended. And this, I told you all this because this is another example of how the European Council tries to compromise, to find, you know, adjustments in situations that can be, you know, controversial in the relationships among the member states. This is good and this is bad, obviously. You understand what I mean. So it is, on the one hand, it is necessary. On the other hand, it can weaken the role of the other institutions. In fact, it has happened later, not later than a few couple of weeks ago, that the European Parliament the President of the European Parliament sent a letter to the Commission asking to start implementing the regulation. And the Commission said it will, so going against what the European Council said in this conclusion. So the situation is evolving. We will see what happens. Okay. Today we are going to introduce the Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers is another intergovernmental body, which means that it is composed of the ministers of the member states, ministers, members of the governments of the member states. it says the treaty says representatives of the member states at ministerial level. It is quite generic because it was necessary to allow also in some specific cases participation by members of the governments of the lender, of the German lender, when the matters affected the competence of the lender in Germany, which is a federal state, and where the division of competence is always often is in favor of the lender. So in general, they are ministers of the governments of the member states. So it is an intergovernmental institution. From what we said last week about democracy in the European Union, this is what we called, very, very generally speaking, the Senate of the EU, meaning that it is the legislative body that represents the states with one representative per member state, a minister of the government. So the council, yesterday we said the European Council has no legislative power. Okay, this is clearly stated in the treaty. The council, on the contrary, has legislative power, which it shares with the parliament. And the next slide is precisely about the legislative procedure. There it is, and then we're going to look at it. So the Council of Ministers has legislative power, which it shares with the Parliament. They are on an equal footing in the ordinary legislative procedure, which means that both institutions have to agree on the same text of the act that is being, of the legislative act that is being discussed. Okay, we said that there are ministers, so 27 ministers. And who are these ministers? This is the other question that we have to ask. It depends. After a decision that was adopted by the, by the European Council a few years back, we have now 10 configurations of the Council, which you find on the website of the European Union. It depends on the subject that is being discussed in each one of the meetings. Okay, so it depends on the subject. We have economic and financial matters, that's the so-called ECOFIN Council. We have the Foreign Affairs Council with ministers of foreign affairs. So we have the Agriculture and Fisheries Council, Transport Council, and so on. So there are 10 of them divided according to the subjects, trade and internal market, and now I don't remember. You find them on the website of the European Union. For each one of these 10 configurations, the member states send to the council the competent ministers of their government. This is the idea. So every time in the meeting, you have the persons in the governments that are competent for that subject matter. The institution is one, though. So in the end, you will have an act that is of the council. It is adopted by the competent council, but it is of the council. What changes is the presidency of the council according to the subjects, because for 9 out of 10 of the configurations, there is a rotating presidency. So one of the members takes the presidency for 6 months and then they rotate. So it will be one of the members according to a list of rotation that has been predetermined. Okay, but there is the 10th council, which is the Foreign Affairs Council, and the Foreign Affairs Council has its own specific president, who is not one of its members, but it is that other guy that we introduced yesterday also. Where is he? Here is the High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. This is an important figure in the in pursuing coherence and unity of the external action and foreign policy of the European Union, because this guy here has basically two hats he can wear. One is as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Council, as we said, so that the council that is in charge of defining and deciding the foreign policy of the European Union. And the other hat is as vice president of the European Commission. The European Commission is, as we will see, the body that has the power of representation of the Union in external affairs that are not strictly foreign policy. So all the other areas of external action, like trade, like development cooperation, economic cooperation, and all the external aspects of internal policies, like cooperation in the fields of transport, of environment, or agriculture, you mentioned it. So it was necessary to build a bridge between these two areas, not which you normally don't have, a problem that you normally don't have in a state, because I don't know if you have studied some political science or international relations, you cannot divide the foreign policy of a state. The foreign policy of a state is composed of different instruments, different tools, and different areas of cooperation or non-cooperation with other countries. No, so you cannot say that international trade is not part of the foreign policy of a state. It is. As development cooperation, as all the other areas that fall within the economic sphere of action of a state, but that are integral part of the foreign policy of a state. In the case of the European Union, it is different, as we said, studying the development of the Union. I told you that the foreign and security policy is separated response to different, criteria and different methods of cooperation. It is intergovernmental. It is decided by unanimity by the Council, the Commission, and the Parliament have very limited role, and so on. And they still are separated, because also after the Lisbon Treaty, the common foreign and security policy is in the Treaty of the European Union separated, a little bit evolved, but still largely intergovernmental. So it was necessary to build many bridges between these two sectors, these two methods, these two procedures for decision making, and so on. And the High Representative, which in the Constitution was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the European Union. So a figure that tries to unify at least the appearance of the foreign policy of the European Union. Now he's called High Representative because all names that evoked federal system were expunged by the Lisbon Treaty. But anyway, the role is the same, bringing together at least we can say the elaboration moment of the external action, because he can consider the work of the Commission as Vice President and the work of the Foreign Affairs Council, where he is the chairman. So he can find a common ground, a common direction, a coherence for the external action. And also he has powers of external representation for the, especially for political issues, because the Commission did not want to give up its own power of external representation for the other areas. So what we can say is that this bridge exists, it is effective, it is useful, but it's not complete. Maybe there are some, pillars that are lacking, or it's not entirely, complete, the construction of this bridge, because there still is a lot of division and also some competition between the Commission that tries to protect its own competencies, because it's with some reason, I must say, afraid that it will be contaminated by intergovernmental decision-making that is taken in the Foreign Affairs Council, in the field of in the framework of the procedures of the common foreign and security policy. This is a very old and ongoing conflict that has been also the object of cases at the Court of Justice, where the Court of Justice itself, of course, tended to protect the community decision-making method, the integration decision-making method, whenever it was possible. So not to give up easily parts of the external action to the intergovernmental area, we can say. So those boundaries that were built over the years by the Court of Justice, by the treaties, first of all, but then by the Court of Justice, trying always to push those boundaries in favor of the community part. So not trying to expand community powers against intergovernmental powers. So these boundaries are still there. The bridges that have been built by the Lisbon Treaty, this is an institutional bridge. We can say there are also normative bridges, are trying to help achieve a more coherent system of external action, but there still are differences and, I would say, not conflicts, but dialectics there, where the Commission tries to keep control of the areas where the community part is stronger. First of all, trade. So the Commission keeps a hold of the trade relations with third countries, which are fundamental for the Union. And if you take trade away from the role of the High Representative, of course, it will compromise the unity of the external action. So, you understand, for example, you read here that the High Representative is also the head of the European External Action Service. The European External Action Service is a very important and innovative system. I don't know if I have already told you about this. I don't remember. Anyway, it is a structure that is basically is identical in some respects to a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is structured exactly as a Ministry for Foreign Affairs. So it's not your ordinary Directorate General in the Commission, but it's really organized as a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The offices are divided according to subject matters and according to geographic areas in Brussels. And then there are the missions of the Union abroad. And the Union has now diplomatic representations in most countries of the world. I don't know exactly how many, but almost every third country has a diplomatic representation of the Union, so unitary representation, the missions of the Union abroad. The missions have different functions, of course, to represent the interests of the Union in the third country concerned, but also they start having some role of liaison with economic operators that work in the country, with the citizens of the EU that live in the country, and so on. So they're quite important. And what is interesting of the European External Action Service is the staff, how it is staffed. It is composed of, for a part, can you please close the door? Let's say the half of the staff is composed of officials of the EU institutions, especially Commission, especially the Council, some also from the Commission. While the other half of the staff is composed of diplomats from the member states. So each one of the member states has to designate a number of diplomats to serve for a certain number of years, I think maximum 8 years, in the External Action Service of the EU, so in the Foreign Ministry of the EU, and also obviously in the missions in third countries. I find this very interesting because it will take, of course, generations to achieve that. But it is important that diplomats that have the mindset of, have been trained to protect and defend always the interests of the member state, of the state, of the government that for which they serve. For those 8 years, they have to change their mindset and think of the common interests. So not which the interests of my government are, but which the interests of the Union are in this specific country, in this specific context. Working together with colleagues from other states, with colleagues that come from the institutions. So it brings the diplomacy together in a way that has never been tried before, because diplomacy is the essence of statehood, of sovereignty, and so on. So this is why this is a very nice experiment, but it will take generations to build new mentality in the diplomatic services of the member states, and to go in the direction of unifying the diplomatic service of the Union, bring it so completely replace the diplomatic services of the member states. This is science fiction, so maybe your children or your grandchildren will see something like that if the EU survives. Anyway, but it is interesting anyway. Also because in certain areas the European Union replaces indeed the member states. And this is again the case of trade. But what happens with trade? So the only area, or one of the few areas, where in the external action the EU completely replaces the member states, because it is an exclusive power of the Union. It is also the one area where the European External Action Service is, if not excluded, at least put a little bit aside, because the Commission has kept very strongly to itself the field of trade, for the reasons we were saying before, not to see it contaminated by intergovernmental invasion. So in the missions abroad, So first at home. At home in Brussels, there is a Directorate General Trade, which is separated from the External Action Service. So they have, of course, connections, they have cooperation, but they are separated. In fact, there is another member of the commission, I don't remember his or her name now, but there is another commissioner for trade. In the missions, there is an office, trade, that is staffed by commission officials. Again, separated for the same reasons we mentioned. So you see that this division of the foreign policy of the Union between the two big areas, foreign policy, intergovernmental, all the other policies integrated with the important, pillar of trade, which is exclusive of the Union, still makes it difficult to have a unified external action. Although, as we said, bridges and efforts toward coherence have been put in place with the Lisbon Treaty, at least to allow communication and contacts between the two. There have been also very interesting and important elements of contact. I'll give you another one, then we go back to the Council. Trade. The European Union has, and this brings us also back to the issue of conditionality we were discussing before. In the field of trade, the Union has established, in accordance also with policies at the World Trade Organization, long-standing policies of preferential treatments for developing countries, in favor of developing countries. The Union has established a generalized system of preferences. The generalized system of preferences is a treatment, simplifying, that grants developing countries that are classified as developing countries according to the data of the World Bank. So we can say impartial, according to impartial criteria. The Union grants trade preferences, so reduces or eliminates, according, depending on the situation, customs duties for access to the EU market. Okay. And it has started in the last, let's say, 20 years, probably even more, to include in the scheme of relations with developing, trade relations with developing countries, also a scheme that requires the interested developing countries that want to have access to the European market to get engaged in a program of protection of fundamental rights, protection of the environment, of sustainability, by accepting to ratify and implement a list of international conventions on these topics, for the protection of human rights, for the protection of social rights, for example, ILO conventions on workers' rights, conventions on the environment, and so on. So the EU regulation has in an annex the list of conventions that have to be implemented by the states. In exchange to this, the Union grants access to the European market for products imported from those countries. But the Union also applies a strict rule of conditionality. So this is an incentive to the states, to the third states. Say, okay, if you respect these conventions, so if you are committed for sustainability, for human rights, and so on, you get access to the European market. But if so, this is a so-called positive conditionality, more for more. The more you are committed in this direction, the more you get in return in terms of trade facilitations. But if the state commits breaches, violations of these principles, of this convention, democracy, rule of law, and so on, there will be negative consequences. So negative conditionality, suspension of privileges and of facilitations. Okay, this is the system of conditionality. Now, according to the regulation, the decisions are taken by the Commission. The Commission monitors periodically the situation in the third countries that are, enrolled in this scheme. But there have been very few cases of suspension of the generalized system of preferences for violation of fundamental rights. And but the most important of them, and I'm thinking about the case of Myanmar and also of Belarus, have been decided by the Commission after the Council in the field of foreign policy decided to adopt sanctions against those states for violations of rights, of democracy in the state. In the case of Myanmar, there was also an involvement of the International Labour Organization for violations of workers' rights, forced labor, child labor, and these kind of things. So the Commission decides independently because that's its position. But in its decision, it takes into account the position and the decisions of competent international organizations like the ILO, and also follows the decisions taken in the common foreign and security policy. Now, this scheme, the Council decides sanctions in the common foreign and security policy, and then the Commission decides trade sanctions, has been criticized, always not going back to this separation, because many commentators have said, you see, the Commission is not independent because it is following the decisions, the political decisions taken by the Council. Are you following? So the Commission should be more independent, should decide without considering. Yeah? No, he was not talking to me.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Who takes decisions about the sanction, the Council or the European Council?
The Council.
Ministers, right?
Yes, well, both, because those cases there probably was a decision of the a political decision of the European Council or a statement or something, but then the measures are adopted by the Council in the field of the common foreign and security policy.
And then the Commission takes the decision of this conditionality.
Yes, and then the Commission adopted another decision, which is an implementing regulation, which is a trade decision.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it is adopted in totally another framework.
Okay, thank you.
What I see from these examples is not a subordination of the Commission to the Council or of trade to foreign policy, but here I really see a synergy. So the fact that you cannot separate the two things. So it's a confirmation that foreign policy should be a single approach. No, it should be unified and not separated like that. I don't know if you agree. It would not make sense that trade with a country to have, you know, privileged trade with a country against which the union has sanctions in place. Does not make sense. So it is obvious that in these specific cases, the decision to suspend trade benefits should follow a political decision to adopt sanctions. It's not a subordination, it's coherence. I see it that way. I don't know what you think. In other cases, things might be different, but in this one specific, I think that's an example of coherence of the external action. Okay, this for the High Representative. Let's go back to the Council. We said of the configurations, the presidents. Oh yes, there is another interesting configuration, which is not a configuration, but it is something different, which is the so-called Eurogroup. The Eurogroup is the meeting of the ministers of economy and finance of the states that are part of the Euro area. Okay, we said that not all the member states of the European Union have adopted the euro as their single currency. So basically the problem was that it was not possible or acceptable for the euro states that the ECOFIN, so the General Council for Economic and Financial Matters, decide for all, no? Decide the economic and financial policy of the euro members. So they wanted to have to decide for themselves. And by the way, also the treaty allows and requires member states whose currency is the euro to decide to take the decisions that affect the functioning of the monetary union among themselves, like in an enhanced cooperation. It's no different from that. And over time, this meeting of the ministers of the euro area took the name of Eurogroup. It was somehow institutionalized. There is also an article in the treaty that mentions it as the place where the ministers of the euro area meet and decide the things that pertain to the monetary policy of the of the euro area. It is not a council, though. Okay. Normally, the meetings of the Eurogroup happen just before the general meeting of the ECOFIN Council, and which ratifies the decisions that are adopted for the euro area. So it's not a council. It's somehow an informal meeting of the members of the euro area. And in recent years, and particularly after the financial crisis that made it necessary, again, you see the need to find compromises and decisions at higher level and so on and so forth. There was the member states started also to have the Euro summits. So basically, European Council of the members of the euro area, so heads of state and government of the euro area. And this was important in moments of crisis, again, to take the strategic decisions for the euro area. But while the European Council is an institution of the Union, so it is inside the system, it is bound by the treaties, although with the flexibility, political flexibility that it has, the Euro Summit is not. No, doesn't exist. It is like an informal meeting of the heads of state and government of the euro area without any, institutional role. Okay, questions? Questions? So now in the last, yes, you had a question.
Could you please the role of the Committee of the Regions, please?
The role of the Committee of the Regions, yes, to protect the interests of the local and regional communities in the European Union. So basically, the Committee of the Regions is composed of elected officials of the member states at local and regional level that are designated by the state, like mayors or members of municipalities or of regional councils, this kind of persons. So they have to be elected in the state, and then they can be designated. And they represent the interests of those communities at the European level. And I mentioned, for example, that the Committee of the Regions can bring action against to the Court of Justice against legislation that, in the opinion of the Committee of the Regions, violates the subsidiarity principle, the principle that tries to make it possible for decisions to be taken as close as possible to the citizens. So the Committee of the Regions evaluates whether a legislation has somehow compromised the competencies of regions, not because maybe a certain goal of the legislation could have been achieved with action at local level and not at EU level, and they can bring action. So that this is what they do. They deliver opinions when requested by the treaties in the procedure of consultation, or they can deliver opinions of their own, spontaneously because they think it is necessary, and they watch over the respect of the principle of subsidiarity. Yeah, it's very interesting because they also promote cooperation, transboundary cooperation between regions in Europe, for example, neighboring regions that can have similar interests and similar economic activities and so on. Other questions? Other questions? No. Okay. The Commission. Let's see. Yes, the Commission. President is Ursula von der Leyen. No, yes, I forgot the decisions, how they decide in the Council. This is important. I was forgetting. The decision making procedure in the Council has been the object of discussions, conflicts, negotiations, compromises, counter compromises, changes over the years, because that the fact that in this institution representing the member states, since the beginning, so since the Rome Treaty, since the Paris Treaty, it was envisaged the idea and the necessity also, in order to achieve integration, to decide by majority vote and not unanimity as it was normal with international organizations, was somehow of of an innovation that was difficult to accept for many member states, even at the beginning. And this is why in the first years of the life of the communities, basically majority was not at all used, majority, and it was a qualified majority. I'm going to explain. But what I wanted to say here now is that it was contested. The principle of majority was contested because the member states did not like the idea of being in a minority, so of having to accept decisions that had been taken without its consent. No? Normal states in international law and international relations are used to unanimity, are used to the rule that they only can be bound by international obligations when they have accepted them, not when others have decided against their will. You understand how disruptive this is in traditional system of international law. But this is one of the big innovations of the European system, establishing the principle of majority. Anyway, in the beginning, it was not that easy. In fact, and we go back to the role of the European Council, which was not yet, or maybe yes, no, it was not yet named the European Council, but it was the summit. In 1968, I think, or 67, there was the Luxembourg Compromise. What is the Luxembourg Compromise? It was a decision taken by the heads of state and government during the crisis of which the French president Charles de Gaulle was the protagonist, precisely against majority decisions. De Gaulle was contesting especially the agricultural policy, you know, the empty chair policy, and this is, you know, history of that period. This crisis was solved with the Luxembourg Compromise. What is this compromise? Basically, it said that, okay, for majority voting, but when one of the member states thinks that a certain decision that is being taken in the council affects its interests and is not acceptable, the member state will invoke the compromise and request that the decision is suspended until consensus is found. So basically back to unanimity. In substance, every time a state was against a certain measure, it could invoke the negotiations in order to find compromise and a unanimity, a consensus on that measure. The result of this was that for a long period of time, only the non-controversial issues were adopted by majority. Basically, never, because if it is not controversial, there is not the need for a majority voting. And basically, unanimity was back, you know, on as a general rule of adoption of decisions in the Council. And this up to the European Single Act. So we are mid-80s. One of the issues of the European Single Act was precisely the elimination of the Luxembourg compromise and going back to majority. And again, in that act, there was a redesign of the qualified majority in order to balance the weight of the different member states in the decision making. How it worked at that time, it's not the case to go into detail, but just the criteria were that each member state had a certain number of votes the big member states with a larger territory and larger population had a higher number of votes, and then there were the smaller that had a smaller number of votes. But
This is Luxembourg or the European similar?
this is the European single, the system of qualified majority
Okay.
before Lisbon. So, yeah, which means that the vote of Germany weighted much more than the vote of Luxembourg. But at the same time, there was a problem of balancing and making it difficult for a few big countries to decide for a large number of small countries. So you have to balance this. So many different balances have been found with the subsequent revisions, with subsequent compromises. There was the Ioannina compromise at the with no, I don't remember which one. No, for the in 2003, I think, when well, I don't remember. Anyway, for deciding the blocking minority. No, so how many states or how many votes in the qualified system are needed in order to block a decision, even if there are minority, in order to avoid imbalances in the decision making. It was very complicated. So in the end, with Lisbon, it was decided to go back to the system one state, one vote, which is more respectful of the principle of equality of the member states, and to balance the system one state, one vote with some kind of, you know, importance given to the population of that state. So one state has one vote, but it is necessary also to consider the fact that that state represents population. So how large the population of that state is has to be also taken into consideration. And this is the result of the system. 55% of member states, which is how many with 27? I don't remember. I had written it here, which is no, I forgot. 15 member states. And then, but these 15 member states at least have to represent 65% of the EU population, according to the statistics that are available at EU level. In this way, the treaty tries to balance the principle of equality of the member states with the principle of equal, you know, also representativeness of the population and distribution of the population.
I'm sorry, can
Yes.
you repeat which is the rate of the population for the 55% of the member states?
55% of member states, 65% of the population.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, 55%, which means we said 15 very small members, maybe they do not reach the 65%, they will need more member states. Okay, and now we can go to the Commission. This is the Commission promoting the common interests. Yes, the Commission has the mission of protecting and promoting the general interest of the European Union. With the Commission, we have to start from the beginning, so from how it is formed. The Commission is composed of 27 commissioners, one from each EU country, and this is another thing where there was a compromise. Why? Remember that I told you that the need for reforming the institutions was also due to the fact that the institutions had started functioning with 6 member states, and now there were 28, and there was, there were problems in the effectiveness of the work of the institutions. And one of the problems was the composition of the commission. So the convention that drafted the Constitution for Europe was convinced that a commission with 1 member per member state was too much, too large. It was difficult to find effective solutions, to decide smoothly. It was necessary, to find 27 different, to establish 27 different directorate general for each one of the members, and the commission had become a gigantic bureaucracy in Brussels, because each one of the directorate general has its own staff, employers, experts, translators, and so on and so forth. So in order to reduce all this, they had proposed a reduction of the members of the commission, by which each one of the member states would be represented in the commission on the basis of how can we say, so not in each one of the commission all the member states were there, but they had to make turns. And okay, they accepted this. If you look at the Lisbon Treaty, it still says that. But then there was a compromise, another one, and they decided to suspend the application of this rule. So the first suspension was in the first elections after the entry into force of the Lisbon Treaty, when the European Council decided to postpone the application of this rule to the next elections. And then after the next elections, I think they were in 2014, they decided to suspend it, and that's it. So we still have 1 commissioner for member state, for each one of the member state. Although, again, you see, it's a contradiction, because the commissioners are supposed not to represent the interests of the member state of which they are nationals. They are supposed to work for the common interest, for the general interest. They are supposed to be independent, completely independent from the requests of their own government. But this is probably a psychological blockade that the governments have, to lose representation in a body that has a very important role in the system. So 27 commissioners, 1 from each EU country, plus the president. And let's start from the president. Because we have to speak about the composition and also the appointment, how the commission is appointed. Everything starts with the election of the European Parliament. The treaty says that after the election, the member states, taking into account the outcome of the election, designate a person as president of the commission. This, taking into account the outcome of the election, has been introduced by the Lisbon Treaty to give what was also, traditionally present there, because even before the president of the commission had been approved, had to be approved by the parliament. So necessarily he or she had to gather a parliamentary majority around his or her name. No? Now this is explicitly stated by the treaty. So this means that the member states have to consider a name as a designated president that can be acceptable to the political majority of the parliament after the elections. This gives, of course, to the president of the commission a political, dimension, reinforces his or her political dimension. After the entry into force of the Lisbon Treaty, in order to be to make this system even more transparent and more, how can I say, more in line with normal political dynamics in a state, in a federal state, the political parties at European level, so these famous, families or federations of political parties, have started to negotiate and find and identify a candidate as president of the commission before the elections. So to submit to the electors their national lists, but saying that they supported a certain person as a candidate president of the commission, so that electors not only had to choose the list that they preferred to vote, but already knew that that list would support a certain person as president of the commission, the so-called Spitzenkandidat. Okay. These last elections, this system did not work, because in the end, after the outcome of the elections, the person that had been, identified as possible candidates did not coincide with the majority that was about to be formed in the parliament. So they had to find a compromise again. The member states, but they had to find a compromise that could be acceptable to the majority of the parliament. And this is where Ursula von der Leyen comes into the picture, because she was not a Spitzenkandidat. She was a former minister of the German government. She is an important figure in European politics, but she was not considered as a candidate before. But she was acceptable to this majority of the parliament. Majority that in fact was journalistically named Ursula majority, because it involves center left, we can say, parties in the European Parliament. So this is the procedure, taking into account the outcome of the elections. The member states designate a person, and the person has to go to the European Parliament, make a speech, programmatic speech, and then on which there will be a vote. If the person obtains a majority, she will be elected as president of the commission. Okay. After that, the president-elect will go back to the member states, and together they will write the list of commissioners. So each one of the member states will submit more than one name, a sort of short list of names, and then all together with the president-elect, they will decide the list of the commissioners. And then the list of the commissioners will go back to the European Parliament, and the European Parliament will vote. Okay, so the result of all this is that the commission that will be established in this way has to be approved and voted by the European Parliament in what is very similar to a vote of confidence between the Parliament, that the Parliament has with the government, with an executive body. And this vote establishes this relationship between the European Parliament and the Commission, a relationship which is made of a constant dialogue through interrogations, to question times, requests of report on individual policies or the general activity of the Commission, information from the Commission to the Parliament on initiatives, events, decisions, and so on. And this relationship accompanies the Commission throughout its life. In fact, there is also the possibility that the Parliament adopts a decision of non-confidence towards the Commission in specific cases of, where the Parliament is gravely unsatisfied with the activity of the Commission. This has never happened, we must say. So, what is the position and the role of the Commission in the institutional structure of the Union? The Commission, we said, has to be independent. It is articulated in 27 directorates general, each one with one of the commissioners as its head, and each one with a subject matter to take care of. So, but although the individual commissioner is and it's his or her staff elaborates the proposals, studies subject matters and elaborates the proposals, all acts that come from the Commission are formally of the college, so of the whole Commission. They're never responsible, they're collective responsibility of the institution and not of the individual commissioner. And this is also why, in case of, in case of political or other kind of problems, the Parliament can adopt a non-confidence vote against the whole Commission and not against an individual commissioner, precisely because it is impossible to identify the responsibility of an individual commissioner. So the role of the Commission is to propose new legislation, so the power of legislative initiative. Then it is an executive organ, which means that it is called, it is the one that implements the policies of the Union, giving execution to the acts, to the legislative acts for which the execution is a competence of the Union. In other cases, it is competence of the member states. Through the adoption, for example, of implementing acts, the adoption of decisions in the field of, competition policy, agricultural policy, and all the policies that give the Commission the power of implementation. Then it is guardian of the treaties. What does this mean? It means that the Commission monitors compliance with the treaties by the member states and also by individuals, legal and natural persons in the member states. So companies, undertakings, economic operators, and obviously member states having the power of intervention whenever non-compliances arise. For example, in the case of the infringement procedure, where the Commission can bring action against a state for non-compliance for infringements of obligations, of European obligations by the member states, or in the case of individuals in this role of monitoring compliance with the policies, the Commission can start investigations and can start procedures, and also decide fines against individuals that are not compliant with the policies of the Union, example, against the competition policy. And then it represents the EU on the international stage. We have already spoken about this because, remember in the speaking about the European External Action Service, I told you that the Commission has its own role of international representations in all the areas of the external action that are, outside the scope of the common foreign security policy, and that are included in basically in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. In all these areas of external action, the Commission has the power of external representation. It has the power of negotiating international agreements with third countries, and so on. So, questions? Yes.
Why Ursula von der Leyen was not elected like Spitzen candidate? What was the problem?
Well, I don't know why they didn't think about her before. I know that the candidates were different, and I don't remember their names, but basically because this is the point, the coalitions that are now part of the Ursula majority had different Spitzenkandidaten. I don't remember their names now. Maybe someone here does. I don't know. And they had to find a solution, either one or the other. They didn't, and they found a third name. That could bring everybody in agreement. That was the point. But now I don't remember the names of the candidates. There was one that was more on the socialist side, another one was more moderate, but I don't remember the names. Someone of you does? No. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, what time is it? Well, it's not late, but I think that we can stop today because we did say a lot of things, and also because the next step will be to discuss the legislative procedure, which is simple, but I want to be more focused than I'm now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye-bye. See you next week.
Thank you, Professor.